G'day guys and welcome, my name is Michael and I'm the Dead Aussie Gamer, here to share with you my tips, tricks, ideas and strategies for playing and running tabletop role-playing games. Today we're back with yet another class spotlight, taking a close look at the Watcho! The Monk. That's right, the masters of martial arts. These guys are battle controllers capable of doing absolutely amazing and supernatural maneuvers in your campaign. We're going to be looking at some of the ways that you can use them, a few ways that you can build them for both your narrative as a PC or a GM, and of course, maybe challenge some of your thinking on monks and martial artists as we go along. As always, we're a performance and portrayal-based video, so we're not really going to be looking at any particular system. So any game that really utilizes a monk or Shaolin kind of character, all of this stuff is really going to apply to it. So, without any further ado, let's talk monks. So firstly, what do we think when we think a monk? Now, the first thing that comes into my mind, at least, always is the Shaolin monk. The ones that come from a large temple where they train rigorously in a style of martial arts handed down to them for thousands of years with their strict regiment of exercises, diets, and even semi-religious worship. These guys become masters of hand-to-hand combat. Also picking up some skills in some very unique styles of weapons, such as the tri-chain staff, or the nunchuck, or the sai, or the, I want to say it's called the cherry blossom sword, but I can't remember what it is. If you know what it is, it's like a flanged sword. Looks very cool. But yes, these are monks to me, and these guys are amazing. Unlike a fighter or barbarian who can really thrive as a frontline, head-to-head, just smashing into obstacles, a monk thrives in a situation where they're able to maneuver and to seize an advantage during battle. Such abilities as their stunning fist and their ki abilities for certain qigong-styled monks allow them a certain amount of, I suppose, versatility when it comes to hand-to-hand combat. Now, a lot of people ask me, well, what's the difference between playing a monk and, say, a fighter with no ranks in, sort of swords and shields, but just uses their fists? What's the difference? Well, for me, a fighter who specializes in unarmed combat is someone who's going to be focused entirely on raising damage. They'll just get into a fight and they'll brawl more than they'll actually do martial arts. Where a monk will look at seizing an advantage. This could be being able to pull in or enter combat without necessarily drawing too much attention to themselves, being able to remove enemies from having turns or even specific actions during battle by tripping them up and knocking them prone, by grappling onto them, by disarming them and stealing their weapon. This and many more is where a monk truly thrives. This being said, while they are great for combat, narratively they can be very restrictive. And don't worry, we are going to go into a big thing on this. In a narrative, a lot of people like to view monks in a very Oriental sense. Whether you be playing in the Forgotten Realms setting, or Galarian, or Shadowrun, or wherever you're playing, monks always tend to fall into the category of being from Asia, from being from China, from Japan, Tibet, Mongolia. A whole bunch of these monk-like places tend to inspire these characters. But that may not necessarily be appropriate for the narrative that you're writing. If you, like me, enjoyed the Dead Gentleman's production company, you would have maybe come across the movie Darkness Rising, in which a game master informs his player that he cannot play a Shaolin monk, as it is not setting appropriate. This isn't a racism thing or, kind of a prejudice thing. This is simply a theme-based thing. The character who, was playing the GM, really wanted to tell a very specific story. And that, at that time, that specific story was set in a very Western, European kind of tale. And having a character be from the Orient show up in this campaign does nothing but really break that immersion and break that story and the narrative. If you can cast your mind into a King Arthur story in which you all play Knights of the Round Table, you have Ghislaine, you have Volsteer, you have Bandri, and then of course you have Lap Sou, who is a Chinese monk from the Orient who specializes in using nunchucks. there is something to say about the character, really drawing the players away from what the GM's trying to build in terms of a theme and narrative. So an Oriental theme can work, but at the same time it can work against you. So what do you do when that happens? How do you change things to make a monk work in these type of games? Well, the first thing I always do when I look at playing a monk is I remove the word monk. For me, monk is kind of like the word paladin. It's something that's there for nostalgia's sake. It was there in, the earlier editions of Dungeons and Dragons. It's there now. It was there in the early editions of Pathfinder, if you're watching this at Pathfinder 2e section. So, of course, it's there now. But the monk itself isn't the right word. If anything, I want to use the word martial artist, just as a flat word. The thing is monks are very Asian by nature, but what's to say that you cannot use the skills and abilities prevalent to a monk for any other martial art? Martial arts have been around for thousands of years. They're worldwide. Each nation, each kingdom, each country have their own series of martial arts that was trained and skilled based on the time of era, the kingdoms, the empires, the need, and all of them could easily be applied to the class itself as a great aesthetic to inspire your PC. Are you interested in playing in a Western game without playing an Oriental character? Well, why not use savate, which is a French form of boxing? Obviously, in a Western European campaign, the French are not too out of place. You'd still get that kind of foreign feel, but you wouldn't necessarily be so challenging as you would take away from the campaign. What's that? You don't really want to play sort of your monk raised in a temple on a big hill type thing. You want to be more of a, sort of a hand-to-hand boxer kind of thing. Have a look at Thai kickboxing or Muay Thai. That is a style of martial arts that goes back ages, and it is such a violent and very assertive kind of martial art compared to Kung Fu and Shaolin. This and many more styles can really help you define who your monk happens to be. So long as you get rid of that moniker, as long as you get rid of the idea that I have to play a monk, therefore I must be Shaolin, you can really open up the class to a whole new world of opportunities. If you are actually playing in Pathfinder 1st Edition, there is also the alternate class of the Brawler, but this video isn't about that. So monks, brawlers, you can both do that. You can change the style of martial arts that you have and simply use the stats and abilities from whichever game you're using. That's at least how I like to do it, because when you look at martial arts, there is such a rich history. It is such a shame to not draw on it for inspiration for your character. I know a fair few friends of mine like to fall into the Drunken Monk category. I don't know whether or not it's because they played some of the earlier Neverwinter Nights. I think Neverwinter Nights 2 had a dwarven monk who eventually went down the road of being a drunken monk. But I see a few of them. And they ask, how do I make a drunken monk? How do I do this? How do I do that? And I was like, well, you need to learn a little bit more about drunken monks first. Namely that drunken monks were in fact practitioners of Jingmo, which was the drunken martial art. There were different styles, different stances. The Chinese teacup, the flute player, the barrel, sort of stance. All these different styles. What style of drunken kung fu are you talking about? If you do drink, are you a dwarf and you drink dwarven ale? Are you an Oriental and thus drink sake and rice wine and spirits? Or are you a hardcore redneck sort of individual who gets into brawls at a bar after he drinks some whiskey? All of these characters can still fall into the category of a monk. Now, I say that, and I know the first thing that people are going to say is, well, you can't really do that because monks need to be lawful. Yes, they do, and that comes into the discipline of a monk. Now, as much as I like to define a monk by the discipline, the idea of them being lawful, I think, is also kind of outdated. Lawful characters need to follow a code and adhere to it. Monks are no different. But I think the code needs to be more along the lines of their discipline as a martial artist, right? If you are studying something like Shaolin, then you might look at observing certain rites, like not allowing corruption to enter your body. No drinking, no smoking, no drugs, no eating meat. These kinds of things are discipline and thus lawful. If you're looking at, let's go back to the redneck brawler, if you're looking at someone who fights only for money, this could also be a certain level of you being lawful. You maybe something happened to you in your past and you will fight for cash, but you won't get into bar brawls because for you that's almost a disrespect to the teacher who taught you how to fight with drunken boxing. So little things like that I think really help stand out. So even if you look at your character as this monk is a bit chaotic, always go back to that discipline. Respect, discipline, and understanding for that martial art will often help shape that monk and really nail down that lawful element. Okay, so we've talked a little bit about the styles. We've talked about them as battle controllers. I want to now talk about something that I don't think enough monks prepare for, and that is, what do you do when ranged combat comes in? Say you're being shot at by an archer, or you're fighting a flying creature. What do you do when that happens? Well, I think my favorite thing to actually have on any monk is rope. You can even see this kind of in the artwork that I've got behind me, but a lot of martial artists wrap their fists and their legs in order to try and protect themselves while they're performing and practicing. Now, rope, for example, can be very versatile. Not only can you use it to, hoist people out of pit traps, to tie up people that you have grappled, but it can also double as an improvised ranged weapon. Allow me to show you a picture real quick. This is a Muay Thai hand wrap. These are often used by Thai kickboxers in order to protect their fists while they are fighting. Now, there is nothing to say that you couldn't have it in such a way that you could untie the rope and use it as a lash, or even tie it into a lasso so that if someone is using the flying ability, to be able to lasso onto them and drag yourself into melee with them. These things and more create a very interesting and versatile dynamic without compromising your aesthetic as a martial artist. So that's kind of one thing that I'd look at. The other is style-appropriate weapons. Daggers are very common, and I think daggers are very underrated. Having a good throwing knife is never a bad idea. What's that? Monks shouldn't use daggers and knives? Well, actually, they were well known for using them. The kunai, for example, which is a Japanese weapon, it bears a lot of similarities to the poi, which is a Chinese weapon, which is a kind of like a metal barb or metal dart that has a small tuft of fur attached to it. Often these were tied to the ends of whips or wires and allowed for an extended reach during combat. Alternatively, they were simply thrown as darts to strike an enemy with a heavy iron bolt. There are tons of examples of where ranged weapons can be used by martial artists. So if you ever play a monk, always keep something on hand. It may not be your best thing, but at the very least, it'll allow you to still contribute when put into those situations. I also recommend that to any kind of combat class that is melee-based, but I feel like the monk, very heavily melee-based. On the other note of improvised weapons, I'm going to get rid of this picture now. On the other note of improvised weapons, my favorite martial artist of all times has to be Jackie Chan. I love Jackie Chan. He's, not just because of his martial arts. He is badass, but I've got to say this, like Jackie Chan, for me, the way that he uses the environment, the way everything for him is a point of contact is just mind-blowing. And he's also such a nice person too. I gush. But when you play a monk, have that same mentality. What around you can be used as a weapon, and how can you use it as a weapon? Leaning over a bar stool so that you place all your weight on the back end to flip the end of the bar stool so that the person charging at you runs throat first into the hard edge of the long bar. It seems complicated, but it's cinematic, and your GM will love that kind of thing. I hope. Maybe. I would. I'd love it if my players did that. Same thing with broken bottles. If you are a drunken master, broken bottles are fantastic. You get a pitcher of ale, you smash it on someone's head, or you have a drink and then smash it on someone's head. You have other weapons like a coat hanger. A coat rack or a hat rack. You could find a broom. You could find sort of a chair leg that you can turn into a tonfa. Thousands of ideas, only limited by your imagination, exist in the world where the monk can play. If you play Pathfinder, there are some feats that will allow you to be even better with those kind of weapons. But I feel as though any kind of martial artist worth their salt will always use what they can in their environment for battle. And you should be no different. Be willing to open up and look at utilizing whatever is around you. I think that'll make you a stronger monk, and obviously one that has a very unique and interesting way of combat. All right, so with that being said, the last thing I want to bring up is portraying a monk. How do we portray a monk? What is the thing that all monks really need to have? Honestly, I think they need their journey. And it doesn't have to be to the West. All monks have to go on some kind of, I suppose, travel. That's the big thing. Many adventurers have quests. I need to find my sister. I need to get this MacGuffin. I'm cursed and I need to get it removed. And these things are their call to adventure. With monks in particular, you will often find that they devote their life to training, to learning their skill and building their craft. So if you are training in a temple or if you're training in a monastery, why would you travel? Why would you leave the comfort of this place that is like a sanctuary to you in order to go out and adventure? Well, finding that reason comes at the behest of a journey. Several different martial arts have different ideals of what you need to do for your journey. Some believe that once you have reached a certain point within your training, it is important for you to travel the world and combat other people so that you learn the different styles and watch as your own unique martial art blossoms into its own thing. Others simply end up on a quest to try and prove that their style is stronger than others, going from dojo to dojo in order to try and earn renown and prestige. Fun fact, there is actually a type of martial artist that does this and steals the signs from the dojo. It's normally swordsmen and stuff like that, but I kind of like the idea of martial artists doing that as well. It could be a quest for perfection. Maybe you believe that everything you have learned from the training at the temple has led you to this point where you now know as much as you can and you need to go and search for something else, something to fill that void that you need, that you first came to train to get rid of. Alternatively, you could always have an NPC rival, someone who is driving your character forward, someone who maybe murdered your sensei and you need to go and avenge them, someone who maybe learnt your martial art and is using it for wicked purposes and you need to go and rally that person in or rein that person in because it is your duty as his fellow student. These and many more are an inspiration to these kind of martial art characters who go on their quests, who go on their journeys. So, I hope you guys like this video. I, for one, love martial artists, love monks, and have a deep respect for them. What about you guys? What kind of martial art characters do you guys want to see, show up in campaigns and games? Leave a comment below and let us know. If you want to check us out in other medias, then please follow all the links in the description. We've got Facebook, we've got Discord, which is a lot of fun. Definitely come and hang out in the Discord. I love meeting people there. Head on over to our new Twitch channel. We are running Strange Aeons with our Patreons. And of course, come be one of our Patreons as of next month, which is of course March of 2019. We are going to be doing a whole bunch of really cool new features for Patreon. So definitely go check that out if you can. And of course, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. And as always, guys, from the Dead Aussie Gamer, game hard or die trying. See you guys.